been hard to focus on anything. I couldn't study Torah. I couldn't read almost anything. I couldn't focus. So I ended up praying. I ended up talking to Hashem a lot more than usual, which is actually one of the great messages in this Torah portion, in the portion of Balak, the power of speech and the power of prayer. And the essence of today itself, it hints to this truth, because today is a fast day, and Jeremy's fasting, I'm fasting, and it ends, it's a summer day, so it ends at 8:30. No food, no water while I'm sick, not a simple thing. But it's, as Jeremy said, it's the 17th of the Hebrew month of Tammuz. And Jews around the world, we don't eat and we don't drink, and we re-experience the fall of Jerusalem. At least that's what we aspire towards. We want to hopefully rectify within ourselves the flaws and blemishes that led to the destruction. And that's part of what the fast is about. That's what it's for. And today starts the period, as Jeremy said, known as the 3 weeks, in which it's a type of mourning which really culminates in Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, which is the day that both temples were destroyed, as well as so many other tragedies in Jewish history. When that day comes, we'll actually get there and experience it together. So the question is, why do we mourn Jerusalem? We've discussed this before. You know, it's not just a city. It's a meeting place in which the most intimate and revealed relationship between the nation of Israel and the God of Israel was manifest. When the temple was destroyed, God's greatest revelation and connection, not only to the Jewish people, but to all of mankind, was lost to the world. And that's why the Jewish people are completely and totally obsessed with the Beit HaMikdash. Because on the deepest level, our mission in the world is defined by it. You walk into my house, right there in the middle of my living room, picture of the Beit HaMikdash. Same with Jeremy. And we have a place that we scrape the paint off the wall to remember if our home, if the Beit HaMikdash isn't complete, if God's home isn't complete, how could our home be complete? So here are just the 5 horrible events in history which we keep in mind today on the 17th of Tammuz. 5 events. Number 1, after hearing about the golden calf, Moshe descended Mount Sinai and threw the tablets to the ground and shattered them. That happened on the 17th of Tammuz. And the second thing, during the times of the first temple, due to the heavy siege on Jerusalem, the Kohanim, the priests, were not able to acquire any more animals for sacrifices. So at that point, the sacrifices had to stop. It may seem like a arbitrary thing, but if you can imagine it, that was a crazy trauma for the nation of Israel. Number 3, before the destruction of the second temple, the walls of Jerusalem were breached. If my math is correct, 1,948 years ago today, 90 today, unless my math is wrong, which it may be, I'm not thinking that clearly. 4th thing was the Roman general Tammuz. He burnt a Torah scroll, which according to Rav Shraga Simmons, in many ways set the precedent and started the pattern of millennia of burnings of Torah scrolls and ancient Jewish texts. And the 5th one was that an idol was placed in the sanctuary of the Holy Temple, which was of the deepest and most unimaginable depth that the mind could fathom, putting an idol in the sanctuary of the Holy Temple. So now, to highlight how deeply our mission and identity is connected to Jerusalem and the Beit HaMikdash, we turn exactly to this week's Torah portion. I was even conflicted about whether to share this, but I just had to, because there's no chance that anyone that is solely reading the English could ever catch the teaching that I'm going to share. Because to the sages of Israel, and even just to the average Hebrew reader, it's impossible to miss. So here's the story as we know it. Just a little background. The nations were terrified of the Jewish people, and the Moabites and the Midianites, who had been sworn enemies of Israel, they were all of a sudden united as allies in their shared fear of the approaching nation of Israel. And they understood that the source of Israel's strength is spiritual. So they hired a spiritual mercenary named Bilaam to attack the Jewish people. Now, although he claimed to be only willing and interested in doing God's will, you can tell by his actions that he very much desired to fulfill the mission to curse the Jewish people. He was eager and he was excited, and he wakes up early to saddle his donkey. It's reminiscent of Abraham, but a different word was used. The word that was used, as a matter of fact, here was vayakam baboker. He arose in the morning, whereas usually the word for waking up is vayashkem baboker. He awoke in the morning. hinting to us that he was so excited to curse the Jewish people that he couldn't sleep the entire night before. So he didn't awake, he just arose. Either way, he was a bad guy, and he was eager to curse Israel, and off he went. And so here's the famous story. On the way there, his donkey saw an angel of God in front of him that Bilaam himself couldn't see, which should have been enough in and of itself to humble him, that his donkey was a greater prophet than he was. But it didn't humble him. And he veered to the side, the donkey veered to the side, pressing the leg of Bilaam against the fence by the side of the road. And Bilaam hit him once, and then the donkey moves forward, and then Bilaam hit him again, and then again. And at that point, the donkey turns to him and says in chapter 22, verse 8, Ma asiti lecha ki hikitani ze shalosh regalim. Ma asiti lecha ki hikitani ze shalosh regalim. Now, even in the JPS translation that I looked up, which is a good one, those words are translated as the donkey saying to Bilaam, what have I done to you that you've struck me these 3 times? But in the Hebrew, the words are not the normal words for 3 times, which would have been shalosh ta'amim, but they were a really unique and unparalleled usage of the word shalosh regalim. Shalosh regalim. Now, some of you may immediately recognize these words for what they are. The shalosh regalim are the 3 high holidays, the 3 times a year when the nation of Israel leaves their home and ascends to Jerusalem for feasts and sacrifices and connection, both with each other and with Hashem in the Beit HaMikdash. And these were indeed strange words for the donkey to use to describe being hit 3 times. Now, Rashi, we quote Rashi a lot. He's a great sage in Israel. He explains that the words God spoke through the donkey were an allusion exactly to that, to the temple. That the donkey was saying, look at you, Bilaam, you're hitting me because you're in such a rush to go curse this holy nation that will serve Mikdash, seeking to uproot this nation that will ascend to the temple 3 times a year. The shalosh regalim was an allusion to the shalosh regalim of the Jewish people going to the temple. Bilaam was a prophet. He was a great prophet. If it was truth that he really wanted the truth, he would have understood that. He would have heard that message, but he didn't want the truth. He wasn't open to being humbled. And there are numerous sages that elaborate on this theme, but the underlying message is all the same. That God was telling Bilaam that he was destined for failure because he was trying to curse the nation that would be ascending to the temple of God in Jerusalem to worship the one true God of Israel. And so here we are on the 17th of Tammuz. We have about, I think, 2 hours left to this fast. And we're mourning the destruction of Jerusalem, of the walls that led to the destruction of the temple. And we're reading about Bilaam going to curse the Jewish people when he's reprimanded by a talking donkey who alludes to the temple. Can you think of another nation in the world that has such a central, fundamental fixation on anything as the Jewish people has on Jerusalem and the Beit HaMikdash? And why? What's it really about? The Beit HaMikdash is about the power of prayer. The Moabites turned to the Midianites to consult with them about how to defeat Israel because of Moshe's connection to Midian, right? He married the daughter of a Midianite priest of Yitro, so they figured that the Midianites had inside info on Moshe Rabbeinu, on Moses, and they did. And what did Midian respond? What was that inside info? They said, quote, his strength is solely in his mouth, meaning in his tefillot, in his prayers. That is ultimately the power of Israel, is in our prayers. And I'll tell you, now that we're back in the land, God is indeed circumcising our hearts and replacing our hearts of stone with hearts of flesh. And as you know, our mission out here on the Judean frontier is not really to create Judea into this, but to reveal that Judea is a global destination for spirituality and transcendence. And Jeremy's going to talk to you a lot more about this. I know he will. But it was so special. It was a landmark event here at the Arugot Farms on the Judean frontier. I was so sick, I couldn't go for more than a minute. But we had a great sage of Israel come out and guide over 100 thirsty Jews for how to speak to God in the most real way. And while I couldn't be there personally, like I said, I did step out on my balcony. And all at once, I heard over 100 Jews, boys and girls and men and women, all different ages, They were spread out all over the mountain. They had been speaking to Hashem as they were just guided in how to do. And all of a sudden, they all together at once screamed out to the heavens. At this point, it wasn't even words. It was just a scream from the deepest place in the soul. I could barely breathe for that moment as tears came to my eyes, and oh my goodness, did I feel goosebumps. At that moment, it hit me that it's happening. It's already happening. We're on our way. We're on our way to Yerushalayim. We're on our way to the Beit HaMikdash. We're on our way together. And I want to end this message, my friends, with words from Isaiah the prophet that we read today on this fast day, that we actually, when we go to synagogue, we read them right now. They couldn't be more prophetic. Now, I strongly encourage all of you to read through all of it. It's Isaiah chapter 55, verse 6 through Isaiah verse 8. But for brevity's sake, I'll start with the part that stood out to me most dramatically, because to me it was speaking exactly about us, about our fellowship, about our connection, about this group, about the Beit HaMikdash, about where all of them are going. So let me just read it to you from here. It's Isaiah chapter 56, verse 3. Let not the foreigner who has joined himself to Hashem speak, saying, Hashem will utterly separate me from his people. And let not the barren one say, behold, I'm a shriveled tree. For thus said Hashem to the barren ones who observe my Sabbath and choose what I desire and grasp my covenant tightly. In my house and within my walls, I will give them a place of honor and renown, which is better than sons and daughters. Eternal renown will I give them, will never be terminated. And the foreigners who will join themselves to Hashem, to serve him, and to love the name of Hashem, to become servants unto him, all who guard the Sabbath against desecration and grasp my covenant tightly, I will bring them to my holy mountain, and I will gladden them in my house of prayer. Their elevation offerings and their feast offerings will find favor on my altar, for my house will be called a house of prayer for all peoples. The word of my Lord, Hashem Elohim, who gathers in the dispersed of Israel, I shall gather to him even more than those already gathered unto him. Is that unbelievable? That is just a prophecy spoken to us for our times, for our days. If that doesn't strengthen us, the Jewish people, if that doesn't strengthen the nations of Israel who love us and want to cleave to us, if that doesn't strengthen all of you, all of us together, I don't know what will. It talks about the Beit HaMikdash, that all of us will be there praying together. May it be soon in our days. Thank you, my beloved friends. Stay in touch, Jeremy. Stay in touch with Jeremy and with me, and let's all stay connected. Great days are coming. We're in great days right now. Shalom, Jeremy.
This highlight was taken from the Land of Israel Fellowship. Every week, hundreds of families from literally around the world come together on our live Zoom sessions to strengthen each other, to inspire each other, and to learn Torah from the Land of Israel, in which we connect the dots between the Bible, the Hebrew language, and the confusing events of our times. Go to www.thelandofisrael.com/fellowship or click on the link below to join. Thank you.